My main inspirations for the Voodoo Man came from the classic Mexican festival Dia de los Muertos, which is the Day of the Dead. It's a celebration that happens every year in November in Mexico. The festival is traditionally done with lots of very colorful makeup, which is to imitate the skulls, the painted skulls that they use for the celebration, which is a way of remembering the dead and celebrating what we have in life and what comes after it. When I was designing the character of the Voodoo Man, my main emphasis was on how eerie the character could be. I wanted him to have a haunting presence, something that felt otherworldly, like he was a bridge between this world and the afterlife. Hence, we drew a lot of inspiration from Day of the Dead. His makeup was very much based on the skulls and the painted skulls from the festival. But the element of having the eyes and the jewelry, the different ways to present him were all about being something striking, something that instantly took your attention. One of the things that I really emphasized on was the spiritual nature of the character. There's a lot of moments in the film where he hints at his contact with spirits and past lives. It seems to be that he can communicate directly with figures in the afterlife. So again, with the character being a bridge between this world and the next, the character needed to have elements of death all around him. And hence you see his makeup and the color of his eyes, it's all representative, symbolic of death and transformation. And even in his location on the set, we had different elements of death figures, and I think at one point you can even see there's a skull in the background, but that was part of a full set. We had a whole range of human bones as props that we used for decoration. So it was really about symbolism of death and how could we convey the bridge between worlds and his understanding of that.
So a big part of my role as set designer was to do very extensive research on voodoo and then recreate props such as papers, spells, any sort of jars of ingredients or any plants that were there. So a lot of the paperwork that you see in the film in the opening shot on the desk is all handmade by myself. I either found designs from voodoo books, or I had a big, not storyboard, but like a big kind of ideas of how me and Jason both wanted it to look and the sort of vibe and the aesthetic we were going for. Really simple. I did the design on regular paper, then permanent ink over the top, and then did the old trick of dabbed it in tea bag and burnt around the edges and crumpled it up a bit. So it all looks like, you know, old authentic paperwork that you would find in a spell book or on maybe canvas or animal skin that you would find in a voodoo shack in the jungle.
Because we had to build the set practically. It was all based in the green screen studio at SAE Institute, and I had constructed the set out of mainly scrap pieces of wood and timber, bamboo fencing, and then pieces of cloth, which we'd ordered online. It was a really fragile design when it came down to it, and we had to hold everything together through just bits of string and clever balancing. But what we got as the finished effect was incredibly satisfying, because although it was all constructed out of bits of scrap, it works really well on camera, because just by shooting with clever angles, there's no way that you can tell that it was made on such a tight budget, let's say.
When we went into the initial planning into how we were going to shoot Voodoo Man, we looked a lot into anything that was based in a shack and had the same kind of feel as the story had. And it led me and the director Jason into one film in particular, which was the Pirates of the Caribbean, well, the whole franchise. There's a specific scene with the witch in the series, and she's got this hut, and we looked at the kind of lighting they used in that, a lot of candlelight, a lot of warmer tones, but keeping the contrast quite high. I initially started basing the kind of lighting plan and the tone we wanted to shoot on out of that. So we shot this project on my Blackmagic Mini S Pro. The reason behind shooting the project on this camera was mainly because of budget. I personally own this camera already, and it gives a lovely image, quite Alexa-like if you treat it right. I did rent a set of Cooke S4 lenses because it gave the separation and tone we needed in the smaller space, and it also gave it a slightly vintage look. I enhanced this with a Black Pumice quarter filter that I put in front that really bloomed the highlights and made everything gel within the scene lighting-wise. The camera stayed on a Munich Grit Factory dolly for the entire shoot. This allowed us to wheel it around very quickly to change positions, and it was also based on a boom arm on top of that, which allowed us to do big movements within the camera, going from someone's head level down to their waist when we went for a big reveal. So we used all the big movements with the jib for very specific moments. One of these was when the Voodoo Man first stands up out of his seat to meet our other character. We did a very big boom motion with him to reveal the face, which gave us a very powerful moment between the two meeting and looking at each other at the first time. We also used it in the lighting cue change right in the middle of the film from our tungsten into our more moonlight blue. We used this as a big boom down to get a big reveal of the cauldron pot lid opening, which gave a very dramatic moment and very much more influenced the tension within that. With the lighting in this film, we wanted a big lighting cue change right in the middle, and then for it to come back at the end to really allow us to play around with the lights. The main source in the entire film was a large 2K, a Arri tungsten 2K, which was blasting into the ceiling into a reflector and then coming back down, which was giving a nice level into the room. And then we placed lights accordingly to highlight certain areas, and especially outside of the structure that we built. I tried to layer as many layers of light as I could to make it feel more full than just the empty room that it was behind it. So one moment in the film that needed a big push with lighting was when Nick's character Damien ignited into flames. I didn't just want to have this as a post look. For me, I needed something on set to sell it, especially for Jason reacting to it. So we had a 1x1 light panel underneath him on the floor with my gaffer laid clean across the floor, and then he would, on my cue of kicking his leg, spin the knob round very quickly to ignite the full 100% blast of it straight up into him, which if you look at in the scene, you can tell that there's practical lighting going around because it's hitting everything else, and doesn't look like it's added in post. You can also see this in Jason's reaction because we did the same cue, which gave Jason a nice flush of colour when he was ignited.
There is one point in the film which I'm particularly proud of, and that is the atmosphere change that happens about halfway through. As the Voodoo Man is beginning to mix his concoction, the lights change, the smoke rises, and you get this real sense of eeriness and mystery, which was such a great achievement for us. It was a challenge because it was all based on practical effects. It all had to be choreographed. Members of the crew were hidden under desks and behind pieces of set. And yet, when action was called, somehow everything just linked together. And the final result was just visually stunning. But the addition of Alex Proudlock's score underneath it really did add a whole new layer to it. So the challenges of combining all the practical elements and making them synchronize was something that was an interesting learning curve, but ultimately incredibly worth it.
So once I was on board, I asked Jason for storyboards. I was very, very keen to see as much as possible before they started shooting the film, getting the concept of what was behind the story of the film. So storyboards, a bit of research. So with the title Voodoo Man, which is kind of perverse in its just by the title. You think, is it Afro-Caribbean? Is it originating from Haiti? There's a huge research background knowledge, which I personally like to do because that just infiltrates into my work and how I compose music and go from there. I came on board before they started shooting, wrote a 1-minute draft demo for Jason just to get the tone right. Part of the brief for the project was 2 instruments. I couldn't waver that. I would have chosen them myself anyway, so it was kind of less time for me to think, oh, I need a didgeridoo and I need some African drums. And they were the only 2 instruments that were chosen for the brief of the film. I chose to expand upon using strings and synthesizers, pianos. So it was quite a small ensemble, but I felt that it would be appropriate to do that, seeing it was only a 5-minute film, and it was quite an intimate film as well. There's only 2 characters. It's 5 minutes long, so having a bombastic enchilade of 12 French horns and a huge epic live orchestra would just be so inappropriate. So going smaller worked well for us.
So whenever I direct a film, I like to obviously visualize and have an idea of the actor to play the character that we have in the story. The fortunate aspect of this is, being a story that I wrote, I always had a vision of who would play the character opposite myself. So when it comes to the casting process, it's always about finding someone who A, is visually correct for the character, but B, has the talent to support and convey the characterization that you want from that actor. I was very fortunate to find Nick Ewens, who is a fantastic actor in his own right, and I actually selected him based entirely off his showreel. It was very evident to me that he would be able to play this particular character in the way that I needed him to. I mean, he has a lot of range anyway, and that's always important when you're directing actors, that they have range, they have flexibility. And when it came to Nick's character, his preparation was really fantastic. He came on the day, he knew exactly what he was doing, and it meant that directing him then became a very minimal task, because you'd only have to really operate on the technical basics, ever so slightly change his performance. I always find it a little bit difficult to talk about acting choices, because some things you do as an actor totally instinctively, and when someone asks, why did you do that, sometimes you'll just say to yourself, it felt right, it was an impulse. And I think some of my best moments come entirely from impulse. You don't have full justification for them, you just know that that is the correct thing to do, because just like human beings, we express ourselves in ways impulsively, and that, as an actor, is the best thing to go off of. Go off of the things that you just know in your gut is the right direction to go with. When I think about how I made the Voodoo Man move, it all comes down to a sort of dance, in a sense. There is a fluidity to his movements. He's not rigid, he's someone who's very happy in just flowing through his environment and being very confident in everything that he does. Acting and directing at the same time is always challenging. As the director, you need to be behind camera, but as the actor, you need to be in front of camera. So what was really helpful with that is having just a second pair of eyes that you trust. For me, my production manager and my cinematographer are both people who understand what I'm trying to capture, because they understand my vision, because we've worked together on it and discussed it in depth.
I was quite keen to see as many edits as possible, because I wanted to be, in the collaboration of writing it as all these edits were coming through of footage. But once there was a lockdown edit, final version, like I say, I wove the tapestry to that. But of course, beforehand, you get all your tools out the toolbox and go, right, I'm going to get this, I'm going to use this, I'm going to use that. With pacing as well, as a composer, you're there to support the performance. That's fundamental. I'm there also to support what's behind the actor's eyes. And of course, hit points, you do want to hit key moments in a film, so events, that sort of thing, but also how does one, key lock door open to the next. So it was challenging, it was great fun, but pacing it with all these ideas, I had to really digest what I was doing slowly and make sure it arrived at the right point in the film. Because it would be a cardinal sin if I did a jump scare at, 30 seconds into the film.
So I also edited this film with a lot of help from the director Jason Farries. I first initially started cutting the rough cut together and then was sending it to him, and we were working out the pacing within that. What me and Jason massaged it into is a very good example of how pacing should work within a film. Initially for the colour grading, I did as much in camera on set as I could. We of course shot it in log, so I had a bit of flexibility in post, but I was working off a Rec 709 grade within all the monitors on set and lighting to that to put as much colour and as much contrast and tone that I wanted in the final image. So when it came to the grading, it was more matching everything than it was changing drastically between shots. So I was matching everything and then just applying the colour and hue changes that I wanted to gel everything together into the look that I thought was best for the film.
To anyone who's just starting out and just starting to make films, just create, be bold, be different, and don't let that little voice inside your head say no. You've got everything in you to be a great filmmaker. All you have to do is just keep working at it. And if it takes you 1 year, 10 years, or 100 years, you will get there in the end, but just keep working.
That was full of waffle and covered in syrup.